Okay, what I wanted to do here for my project in Master Leadership is I created a series of sketches here using Sketchboard. I've seen this concept used, and obviously, this is my first attempt at it, doing something different and new. I kind of went back and forth on a couple of different things, and I think I've settled on doing this here. So, what I wanted to attempt to do by creating this was kind of take everything that I thought was really important about developing a strong leader and what that means and what leadership looks like based on obviously the modules that we've gone over in the class. And so what I've kind of done here is just tried to be as creative as I can. This is something for me that is obviously, as I said, pretty new. So I don't know how it will turn out, but we'll give it a go here. So what I did was I put at the focal point here, the leadership mindset. And you can see that's kind of the theme here is how do we develop that? What traits and characteristics go into developing a good leader? So I've identified four things that I thought were pillars of great leadership, of developing great leadership. And then within those, I've tried to break them down a little bit. Obviously, each one of these could be broken down infinitely more than what I've done. I've tried to simplify it a little bit for the sake of brevity here. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through this here and show you what I came up with. So I've got these four, and they're all connected, and I'll tie them back in here. But the first one that I want to start with up here is growth. And I think that's the first thing that we identified pretty early on in the class is that you've got to have that growth mindset. So we talked about analyzing Dweck's growth mindset, and that if you come into a leadership position, whether it's in the classroom as an educator, in the business world, whatever, with a closed mindset that people cannot experience growth, you kind of set yourself behind the eight ball in terms of what you're going to get out of your people that are working for you, the leadership skills and whatnot that you exhibit as your own person are going to be stunted with that mindset. So we want to obviously identify that we're looking at the growth mindset, and that because of that is a process that it's going to take time to develop leadership. It's going to take time to develop the work that your people do. And so in that process, you're going from point A to point B. And along the way, there are a lot of different things that you need to do as an effective leader. You need to assess where you're at point A. Where are you starting? What are you starting with? We talked about different types of assessment and education, obviously, with the model today being that we do a lot of, obviously standardized testing. What does that look like? How do we adjust to that? How do we adapt to that? And then how do we look at going along this road here to get to where we want point B to be? And obviously, the other main component to that is goal setting. What are your goals? How do you reflect on those goals? What processes do you go through as far as journaling and reflection to see how have I gotten from point A to point B? So I think that's the first thing that we want to identify there. I think as we move on over, another key characteristic and trait of developing effective leadership is empathy. And when you think about what it means to have empathy and to practice empathy, you take a look at who you are, who they are, who are the other people, and you kind of lay that over there. And when you do that, and you can kind of see where you've come from, where other people come from, and you can kind of put all that together and blend that into understanding what other people go through. And I think there are two really key things here when you look at this. I think number one is the worldview. You've got a worldview of how you experience life, your upbringing, your morals, your values that have been instilled in you because of your upbringing. You see the world a certain way. And I think in education in particular, it's very important to remember and realize that other people have had extremely different situations, and they may not see the world anywhere close to the way that you do. And as an educator, obviously, you've got 25, 30 kids that are coming in the door, secondary level, maybe 100 different students that are coming in the door every day that bring a different worldview to the table. that has a lot of potential to offer if you can tap into that, and that's really important. I think the other thing that goes into developing great empathy as a leader is communication. You've got to be able to communicate and dig in and find out, what is your worldview? Tell me about where you come from. Tell me about your experiences and what you see, and the impact that that can make by just having those conversations and having those open lines of communication. Obviously, we talked about Dudley and his experience through his TED Talk of, seeing that young lady and what experience of what she was going through, and him being able just to simply communicate with her the impact that that had on her life. Obviously, that's a pretty extreme situation there, but something that I think is really important to keep in mind is, as you develop great empathy, you're not only experiencing and seeing what other people have, but that you're talking about that and you're using that to progress as a leader there. I think as we move on down here, one of the next main themes that we talked about is creativity. And obviously, we had the model there of Cleese and what he talked about in terms of, some of the things that I boiled down here. Be a risk taker, model. As a leader, are you modeling creativity? Are you fostering that environment? That you have to be open-minded. There's a time and a place for you to, put your foot down and say, okay, we've made this decision. But as he said, if you take that mindset in the creative world, he gave the example of the man on Monty Python that he thought much more talented, but he would just kind of take the first solution that came up and run with it. Whereas Cleese would just, fight tooth and nail to think of exhaust every option before, and he thought, they made that decision. He thought that led to him obviously coming up with ultimately better options for solutions on things. Serious versus solemn, I really thought that was a great key, talking about using humor and whatnot. Yes, there are times where things are serious, but you can institute that humor versus when things are solemn. You got to kind of know that fine line there. And then ultimately, as we talked a little bit about already, work at it. It takes a lot of work and energy, never take a day off type mentality to be able to get to this model over here of creativity. And that's where a lot of the things that he talked about comes from. You can have barriers, you can have people, you can have circumstances, situations that might endanger you being able to do these things. And these are not easy things to do. It's not easy to be a risk taker because we preach don't fail in education, even in society, too big to fail with the bank industry and whatnot. So just ultimately, being able to take this list, which looks very simplistic, but then apply it can be a whole different ballgame. So creativity is obviously one of those things. And then finally over here, I know we haven't really talked about this yet, but something that I kind of add as my own flavor here is just being a facilitator. I think in education we've done a lot of discussing lately, at least at our district level, about the two models of education: the sage on the stage versus the guide on the side. And we've tried to preach to our educators in our school district, get away from that sage on the stage mentality. That whole I'm going to lecture for 45 minutes and then leave 5 or 6 minutes at the end of class for you to try to apply what I've learned, and then go home and do the homework and have questions, and then so there's just all that negativity, I think, boredom, non-engagement from that model, versus being that facilitator where you introduce something and then you allow the class the opportunity to be able to grow, to be able to apply their creativity, work with each other, collaborate. And you're the facilitator on all that. You don't take a back seat. You're not any less important as an educator, but that the art of teaching now is, how can I make these kids connections? How can I help them explore and see who they are and use their talents to be able to answer an assessment that I've introduced? So I think, two big things as a facilitator. Number one, you challenge people. You constantly push them out of their comfort zone, as this drawing kind of, maybe conjures up here. You've got this challenge in front of you, and you got to be the facilitator, the one to introduce that to the kids and push them and not let them get bored, and not let the high ability kids just sit there bored, but also not let the ones that are kind of in your struggling range think, oh, well, I can't do this because I've been told my whole life I can't do it. You got to challenge them and provide that. And then ultimately what goes along hand in hand with that is the support. these guys are running the race. They've got a long way to go in education, depending on where they're at. Maybe they're right by that finish line. Your job as that facilitator is to support them, to provide them with the tools that they need to be successful. Again, sometimes that can be difficult to do. You know, when you're in that environment as a teacher and you've got that one student or couple students that really know to push your buttons, you can't let that get in the way. You can't let that discourage you from finding ways of supporting them, finding ways to get them engaged and challenged, and all the other things that we've talked about. So I think, you know, as we kind of back out and look at this from the 1,000-foot view here, you know, you can see that all of these, as I've drawn these arrows here, tie in together. And I've tried to make that point as I've gone through and broken this down to take a look at how all this kind of comes back in. You know, not easy to do, certainly. Not one of the things that, you know, you can go through and say, wow, I'm going to do this, you know, and be successful at it. Takes a lot of hard work and energy and effort, but I think as I've learned throughout this course, it is possible to do. You just have to prioritize it. You have to make it one of those things where you're just going to get that mindset that I'm going to be a great leader no matter what role I'm in, as an e-coach, as a teacher, as an administrator. I'm going to apply these things each and every day and hopefully get better each and every day as a leader.